good to have you with us on the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, for over 6 months now, we've been tracking very, very closely the situation, the standoff between India and China. Right from the first week of May, we've been telling you what's been the build-up, the movement and developments along the line of actual control, and then the series of talks that were held. Now, one of those talks, the diplomatic military level talks that involved, a mix of senior bureaucrats and generals from both sides, held a long conversation yesterday. Those talks were actually held for over 12 hours. Now, through the day, we got, smaller inputs of what was discussed. The fact that, in the way India has now held on to some positions of advantage, have actually claimed what were essentially some of our own areas and peaks, but had just been left, has unnerved China. And China now wants us to move back from some of those. But the fact that we have held firm is what many people told us. Now, we are given to understand that there could be a joint statement that the two sides could issue anytime, maybe tonight or tomorrow. And I've got 4 experts with us to really help us understand where can we go from here on. Remember, with the onset of winters, things could get very tricky. Not to say that our forces aren't prepared, but that would essentially could mean that the stalemate just goes on for a really long time. Are we looking at a prolonged stalemate, or could there be some kind of a breakthrough that could be announced today or tomorrow when that joint statement comes? That's essentially going to be the focus of our conversation. Of course, we were hoping to hear a little bit more on that joint statement by now, and then we would have had a lot more to discuss. Nevertheless, I have got a power-packed panel here. Let's say good evening to Pinaki Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary for Ministry of External Affairs, joining us this evening. Lt Gen PJS Pannu, former Deputy Chief of the IDS. He's been the former Corps Commander as well, with a lot of experience in the Ladakh zone. I also have Maroof Raza, Strategic Affairs expert, joining us this evening. But first up, to Senior Editor of Economic Times, Manu Pabi. Manu, is there anything more that we know of what was spoken about yesterday, what we could look out for when this joint statement comes?
Joint statements have actually just come out. I think it's just come out like a few seconds back. It doesn't really say much as expected, because the talks themselves are pretty much deadlocked, and the reason for that is that both India and China have taken some very hard decisions. And I think in the talks yesterday itself, China insisted that India move back from the forward locations in the Chushul subsector in the southern bank, for which India does not want to talk about, because the Indian stand is there has to be a comprehensive disengagement at all LAC points, not just one point to the other. So very hard positions taken by both sides, which leaves actually little doubt that I think troops are going to stay in the winters. Talks are deadlocked. There is no breakthrough, and I think you will see the deployment continue deep into the winter season. And we can't, talk of peace as of now. But,
okay. In fact, Manu, if I could just come in here for the benefit of, our panelists as well as for viewers, I do have the details of the joint, press release that has now been issued, and it's a joint press release of the 6th round, which was held yesterday, of senior commanders meeting between India and China. Let me just read it out in detail. On September 21st, the Indian and the Chinese senior commanders held the 6th round of military commander level meeting. The two sides had candid and in-depth exchanges of views on stabilizing the situation along the LAC in the India-China border areas. They agreed to honestly implement the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries, strengthen communication on ground, avoid misunderstandings and misjudgments, stop sending more troops to the front line, refrain from unilaterally changing the situation on ground, and avoid taking any action that may complicate the situation. The two sides also agreed to hold the 7th round of military commander level meeting as soon as possible, take practical measures to solve proper to properly solve the problems on ground and jointly safeguard peace and tranquility in the border area. So I'm just going to repeat, some of these points of the agreement. Implement the important consensus that was reached at the previous meeting that led by the two foreign ministers. Strengthen the communication on ground to avoid any misgivings and misjudgments and misunderstandings, because we've seen what that leads to, the kind of ugliness and face-off, especially at a time when there is so much tension along the line of actual control. Stop sending more troops to the front line. I think significant buildup has already happened, and neither of the sides would want more of that. Refrain from unilaterally changing the situation on ground. We've been saying that for a while. And avoid taking any actions that may complicate the situation. Very quickly, let me just get a reaction from General Pannu on this. General Pannu, your reading of the joint press release, the joint statement that has just been issued.
Thank you, Tanvi. Between the two countries, this is a common language, right from Panchsheel days, and then further on to 1993, and 96, 2003, and actually year after year, and every time you meet, it's a similar language which talks about confidence building and not taking unilateral actions on the line of actual control. There is nothing new. It is a repeat of the same language. And same language has never been implemented in letter and spirit by the Chinese, while Indians have always stuck to each and every protocol as has been spoken about. Are we going to, again, fall into the same trap of following the language that is being read out today? The answer is no. Chinese have to demonstrate that they mean each and every line that is being spoken, even though it is a joint statement. But I would read it as more of a statement that the Chinese must adhere to first, to set an example and to bring confidence back, because they are the ones who've broken the confidence.
Okay, very to the point and very clear on, how you read this, Maroof. Would you agree that it's not really what the joint statements like these really say until we see action on ground by China?
You see, Tanvi, we have over the years, as General Pannu has rightly brought out, adhered to the letter and spirit, and I mean, virtually every diplomatic option, even in the last 5-6 months, has been explored, and I'm beginning to believe it's been exhausted. And that doesn't lead me to say that we now should resort to the military option, but it leads me to say that let's not put too much of the onus of responsibility on our diplomats to get a troop withdrawal done to a status quo which existed before April this year. Secondly, there is a lot of talk in all circles about this extended deployment. Deployment, to my mind, is now actually what it should have been even before the Chinese came in. And this deployment was averted because, despite recommendations of many senior officers, the top brass in Delhi thought we should focus our energies on Pakistan because diplomacy will take care of China as a hangover of the legacy of the 60s. That you've clearly seen hasn't given us results. And these troops were deployed there. Now, from my appreciation of things, will remain there perhaps forever. In many ways, the Chinese intrusions, I've said it earlier, reflect both the events leading up to the 1962 conflict and the events leading up to Kargil. Before 62, we kept assuming China will do nothing more than push its weight a bit, and Nehru and Krishna Menon would be able to talk them out of it. We failed miserably, and we saw the results. In Kargil, Pakistan took us by surprise. It was not just a sort of betrayal of an agreement, it was a betrayal of trust. The same is the situation today. And the Chinese have built up to positions which they have claimed either in 59 or around the 62 war, and even beyond that, 93, 96. So let's not expect that any amount of diplomaties in terms of these documents will get them to pull back. Two important things for me, I think we should need to keep a watch on. Remember, before the 1971 war, Mrs. Gandhi took about 8 months to build up global opinion against Pakistan, and then we saw history and geography being created. I'm not suggesting that we could achieve the same with China either on the LAC or the McMahon line, but quite clearly, we need every friend in the diplomatic community to keep China distracted, because President Xi Jinping is doing this entire exercise to deflect his people's criticism against the handling of the situation internally in China, or the Chinese economy not booming the way he had promised a few years ago, or China not appearing as muscular as everyone thought China was. And China is really caught between the devil and the deep sea. The deep sea is where America's 3 aircraft carrier groups are hovering, waiting for China to give them the Pearl Harbor moment, when things will become bad to worse if the conflict, if ever it takes place, escalate. And the devil is the Indian soldier who has shown you in Galwan that he can break necks of Chinese soldiers with bare hands. So where are we? We are finally at a situation that we need to understand that heavens haven't fallen and they won't fall, but we should brace ourselves for dealing with the new China, which will include both territorial aggression and cyber attacks on Indian business and industry. And that is the way I see things panning out over the next few months.
Okay, all right. That's a very interesting thing, Maroof. I'm going to come back to you and ask you a little bit more about these other aspects that you've raised and how they will pan out. But if I can just bring in Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti as well. Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, do you agree that perhaps the way forward is to deal with it more with on ground, more on the military level, while we keep trying to distract it with other issues, because the diplomatic channel so far hasn't really worked. Every time China promises us something on ground, they go and do something else.
I think we are in for a marathon, not just a 26-kilometer marathon, but a very, very much longer marathon here. And the diplomatic channels, of course, as a diplomat, I would always support that they should be kept open so that we can message each other. But the statement that you just read out does not give me much hope, I think, because I know that it's fairly anodyne and repeats a lot of the rhetoric of the past and the recent past as well. So I don't think we are going to see a quick withdrawal or a quick solution. It's out of the question, I think. And I think we have to prepare for the long haul. And that is what I think the army is doing, and the military and other forces are doing, the Air Force, etc. China, by the way, is also beefing up its forces in the interior, let's say up to 200 kilometers or so, where their airfields are, and they are beefing them up, and they have actually extended the runways, etc., to accommodate heavier aircraft or well-armed aircraft, etc. So I think this is going to continue. China is continuing to play its psychological sort of game that anything could happen and we are preparing for war, etc. So we'll have to also prepare for war, as I see it. And I don't think we can trust the Chinese one bit anymore beyond this point. Although there are allegations that in the Chinese sort of discourse and social media and other, think tanks, etc., which keep on blaming India. But that is China's game plan, and we know that that's to build a narrative within China and domestic opinion. So I think we are in for the long haul, and we will have to prepare to hold and defend our positions as they are. And if I don't think we need to take any aggressive action. It's not necessary. We simply hold the line and let China, if they want to provoke, etc., we give them back in their same coin, like we did at Galwan. So I think there is no need to expand the conflict unless China wants to do it, and we should respond. And I don't think we should go into any aggressive mode at the moment. We should use other tools other than the military that we have, including building international opinion, the Quad, for example, the economic aspect, so many other things. After all, don't forget, after we banned the Chinese apps, a lot of other countries are now joining the same bandwagon. So I think we'll have to build on that as well. In other words, we have to use all the tools in our disposal.
Okay, let me just go back to Manu because, when the joint statement came, he was also making a point and I had interrupted him at that point, Manu. But like you said, nothing new in the joint statement, just reiterating what has already been said in the past. Perhaps just to indicate that yes, the talks are continuing and so we need to do everything required to not let the tension go further up on ground.
Yeah, see, I agree with the Maroof and General Pannu on that. You can't really trust the Chinese on what they say. But the only takeaway that I see from the statement is one line which both the Indian statement has and the Chinese statement has is that there's an agreement not to send more troops to the front line. See, already you have about 50,000 odd troops from both sides, so total about 1 lakh troops on the border, which is a very volatile situation. So this one line which says that we have agreed not to further increase forces at the border is a slightly good takeaway that you perhaps can have from the statement, but nothing else in the statement suggests that there has been any sort of consensus on moving ahead of the situation. It only talks about another round of meetings, and I've seen this. There have been 6 rounds of meetings, no solution at hand. And even from the talks that happened yesterday, we understand that the Chinese are still hard bound on their approach towards particular areas like the finger area. They're still insisting that they don't want to go back, and they are insisting still that Indian troops should move back from heights occupied in the Chushul sector. It is actually a very, stubborn approach, which gives one to believe the Chinese have no real intention of de-escalation. That somehow keeping the border on the boil suits them for perhaps a larger purpose that they have in mind. So I think we will have a very dangerous few weeks and coming up till the winter set in, because troops are remaining there, and I think both sides have to be very aware of the fact that this could boil down into a larger conflict. There is a possibility of that. What the talks have done is perhaps keep it contained to this area. So no more border troop build up is a slight positive, I would take.
Okay, in fact, that was something that also caught my eye. Let me ask General Pannu that. General Pannu, especially keeping in mind the extent of troop buildup that has already happened, should we be reading a lot in this specific line that we've agreed to not send more troops to the front line?
Tanvi, it's very difficult to really discern whether more troops are coming or not. The force levels which are already there, you would see the number of convoys running only for logistics is going to be very heavy. In fact, I'll give you an example. At the onset of winters, once the Chinese brought in about 400 trucks very close, and we called for a flag meeting after sending a hotline message. And they told us that we are bringing coal and we are bringing certain things only to keep our troops warm when there were not so many troops on ground. But since we insisted, we found that some of the vehicles did not come up, and many vehicles which were moving actually were taken underground or here and there dispersed. Today, when the winters are actually setting in, you see many stretches going down, the temperatures are dropping, the logistics are going to be so heavy, it's going to be very difficult to make out whether more 100 or less 100 vehicles are there, because the vehicles are going to actually move in thousands. The transport aircrafts are going to move, in hundreds. The trains of the Chinese, which they have an elaborate system of railway, are going to continue to move. It's going to be difficult whether they are building troops or not, but certainly they would build troops. When you talk about the northeast, that is opposite Arunachal Pradesh, the lines of communication there are much shorter. They would bring in convoys from Chengdu, and those highways are quite wide, and they have a huge trafficability. I don't think so. We should buy that. In fact, Chinese are experts in lulling us into complacence. And if they say we will not build troops, it means they will build troops. They have huge tunnels. They must have already stocked to a point that they will be able to build huge amount of logistic stamina. The only point at issue here is that what is going to happen next, whether the build-up happens or not, but I would believe that they would build up and expect the Indians to stop building up. And I don't think so. We need to buy that. We need to actually look at each and every nook and corner as to what the PLA is doing. But since I know the ground in detail, every fortnight there is going to be a dip in temperature by about 10 to 15 degrees, taking it down to minus 40 degrees in next about 2 months, or even minus 40 to 50 degrees by November, December. The Chinese buildup has already taken place to a point that either the soldiers are going down and falling sick, and more replacements would come up. There are heavy containers in which they acclimatize. They are already there in which they do pressurized acclimatization. The lower temperature, what is important to understand is not only brings it does not only bring the degree of difficulty to the existence of troops, but it also makes the ground, which is otherwise boggy, that too in Depsang area, it makes it more suitable for mechanized operations. And as I said, typically in the plains of Depsang, the Chinese troops, the way they have blocked us, they have blocked our vision at Hot Spring, Gogra, Anila, even Bottleneck. Usually you can see certain areas across. Now you cannot. They could be actually on their own secretly building some tank runs in those areas, which is possible, making ground that the tanks will go into certain areas and wait for the ground to become conducive for use of mechanized operations. Chinese today are on a back foot, and they also know it, and we also know it. It is good for them in their strategy to sing peace because that is all that they can do at the moment. But have they reached a point that they would negotiate? The answer is no. I would understand from my experience that the Chinese would look for a counter QPQ. They might do it in the northeast, or they might do it in Depsang when the ground is more stable for the tank and for the mechanized columns to move in there. Thereby, blocking the Karakoram Pass, making sure that they get into certain areas that we will not be able to get them out. Why I'm talking about this is that in summers, the Shok River and all the rivers are in spate. And when Galwan happened, actually those rivers and nalas were in spate. Later on, more water came into those areas, but as the winter set in, they will become more stable, and they have masked our vision on the other side. If they do this, they cannot cross certain mountain passes because passes are going to be shut, but ground is going to become more firm, and wait for a QPQ from their side. And then once they are on a higher side, they would keep the threshold below the nuclear level, and then announce it to the world that Indians are on a back foot and we are now offering peace. Make us silly, look very embarrassing, and very small in the whole world, and they would also possibly time it when the Americans are busy in their own internal matters. I don't think so. Whatever statements are written, we hope for peace, but we have to prepare for war. It's war time. Even Pakistan environment is not very conducive. Their political environment is shaky. The military just might take over. And they also might to prove a point to their own people that military is important. They're already singing Kashmir there. So, I find that we have to be extremely careful.
Yes.
This is not a good time for us to relax and hope that there will be peace. There will not be peace unless we are prepared for war.
Well, As distressing as it sounds to me, I know you're right, and what you're saying is a very real possibility, and not just on one front, but perhaps then on two fronts. And we must be ready for any eventuality, which is what even the government seems to have suggested. But Maroof, can't let our guard down, not just in Ladakh, but in several other areas as well, where the Chinese may try to now provoke. Would you agree with that aspect?
You know, I agree with almost everything General Pannu has said because, he's held many important positions in the army, including being in the MO. So these kind of things have been played out again and again in their various discussions. Every eventuality has been considered. But I just want to add 3 or 4 other points. The first is that, Mr. Modi now faces a sort of devil's alternative, because would he like the whole situation to fizzle out when he could have perhaps taken victory from the jaws of the Chinese and given back to India the opportunity to bury the ghost of 62? And I'm not saying that we are looking at a full-fledged campaign, but the window for operations against the Chinese on the Himalayan front is certainly there till the end of November. And our recent aggressive moves around Moldo and on some of the heights around Chushul have shown that we can still pull off a surprise or two. And as General Pannu argued, the more you go into the winter, the more you give them an opportunity, A, to build up their forces to be able to enforce a decision which might not be favorable to us in Depsang Plains, where a lot of tank and mechanized vehicle activity is expected to happen. You could get them the opportunity to build up the necessary logistics and troop levels to be able to get an edge over us, because please understand that as the attacker, and we have no territorial ambitions in China, unlike Mao and his followers of his legacy, and Xi Jinping is a big one on that. When Mao had said that Tibet is the palm of China and China must get out the 5 fingers that extend from Tibet, Aksai chain, Sikkim, Bhutan, Arunachal, all those areas, including Nepal. So clearly China has a long-term territorial agenda. I think now is the time to make some more spectacular moves to suddenly put China further on the back foot. And the fear that China would then be able to raise the stakes should be shed for once and for all, because even now, as an active defense, you have the capacity to surprise China. You see, build up a certain amount of activity on the defensive front, and even limited military movement is not war. And even if wars are fought between nuclear weapon states, and I can give you 2 examples between China and Russia in the 60s and between India and Pakistan and Kargil, it doesn't eventually lead to a full-fledged conflict which will see nuclear annihilation. There is always the strategic space to make a game and still not go in for the full-fledged option. And the last point I wish to make is that China is very wedded to the concept of unrestricted warfare, which is elucidated by 2 of Chinese military officers in that book by the same name, which Chinese leaders have come to believe is the way forward for their warfare. So my argument is that the enemy expects you to do 3 things. Do the 4th, as Sun Tzu would say to the Chinese, and you will catch them on the back foot. Don't wait for them to set the agenda and take the initiative away from you. Otherwise, history will not forgive this government and the many others who have sung the tunes of this government to say that this is a strong government and has given India back its pride, which it lost over the decades and centuries.
Well, that's been often said. If not now, then I don't know when this government will show that. And there are early indications, of course, with what we've done just in the end of August, and that has definitely unnerved China. The operation that India carried out to take charge of some of the advantageous points and peaks, and we do know from our sources that even in the talks that were held, it was very clear that China was not very happy with it. And these are on our side. That's not the point. But the fact that we have been so firm and we've asserted ourselves has definitely been, has definitely sent across a strong message. Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, quickly, closing comments from you on this issue. Do you see then this stalemate continuing for a long time, which was supposed to be our initial, question and conversation? Are we in this stalemate deadlock for the long haul?
Absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, that this is a multiple marathon that we are going to run. And I have no doubt that we are in it for the long haul. And I don't think there is going to be a short-term solution at all. We will keep talking. China will string us along with these talks and these statements. But I think our military knows that very well. And I think there is enough coordination to read what China is going to do or not do. And I think we should also think of scenarios and which can surprise the Chinese. I think that is something that is we have not done in the past, and I think that is very necessary. I think we should plan and build scenarios where we can cause some surprises. Otherwise, we will be reactive all the time, and China knows that, and that we are going to be reactive, we are defensive, etc. I'm not saying that we have to be aggressive to the point that it causes a conflict, but short of that, I think, and what Maroof just said about the warfare part, that the unrestricted warfare, which basically means also unconventional and asymmetric warfare of all kinds. I think we'll have to look at the whole spectrum of this conflict, not just the military angle, diplomatic, we have to look at the economic and various other angles that we can explore. And I again reiterate that I don't think this is going to be a short haul, and I think we should be prepared for the long haul. The government must prepare the population for this kind of a long haul, and we have to get our internal act together so that we can support our military to the maximum possible extent through economic revival, through morale, through every other things that we have in our toolkit, national toolkit for this kind of a long-term conflict.
Okay, let me quickly just recap. No big breakthrough is what our experts are also saying, basis the statement that's come through, and that's very clear because the statement with few different terminology and phrases is largely what we've seen in the past. And when it comes to China, we must not take them on face value until we see that action on ground. In fact, I just wanted to read this out earlier as well. This is what the Chinese president said at the 75th UNGA session that's going on. Prime Minister Modi also had a specific message that was put out earlier. Now, the Chinese president said China is the largest developing country in the world, committed to peaceful, open, cooperative and common development. We will never seek hegemony, expansion or sphere of influence. We have no intention to fight either Cold War or a hot one with any country. We will continue to narrow differences and resolve disputes with others through dialogue and negotiation. So, again, this is what they say, while everybody now knows what they've done on ground along the line of actual control. What can we expect next? And Manu Pabi, very quickly before I wrap this conversation, what can we expect in the coming weeks?
So I think the coming weeks are going to be very critical. You're going to have a very uneasy kind of a calm. It's an uneasy period of armed coexistence on the border. And I think this will happen under the overhang of a possible limited war on the border. That possibility cannot be ruled out. Both sides will be on alert, and no possibility can be ruled out in the next few weeks. In fact, I think the month of October is going to be very critical in the long-term solution of this problem.
All right, it's going to be very critical. The month of October, nothing, no possibility can be ruled out. I think that's been the consensus on this panel tonight. Thank you so much to all you gentlemen for joining us, on this conversation as the joint statement by India and China got released. Fact of the matter is, viewers, it doesn't change anything. We cannot let our guard down. Things are very, very tricky, extremely tense, but this time we are ready for any eventuality. Quick break. Lots more news updates on the other side. Stay with me on the Urban Debate.